Foley. I am a pediatrician at the Cleveland Clinic, and Peter Johansson Assisi and I have been working together trying to generate some energy around the Charter for Compassion. It very simply is an international organization that encourages the application of the Golden Rule in our everyday life. If you go seek it out online, charterforcompassion.org, you can read the charter there. It's a brief document. Individuals are encouraged to sign on. Institutions have supported it, municipal organizations, to keep those ideas mindful in their daily work. This past spring, Toledo, Northwest Ohio, signed on the Compassion, and we're very fortunate to have Judy Troutman, who is one of the organizers for that effort, here today to tell us a little bit more about it.
You want to go to the introductory speakers?
We'll have some other folks who are going to join in and share how the Golden Rule applies to their faith traditions as an illustration of how this all binds us together rather than pushing us apart. We have John Clark from the St. Alban Episcopal Church. We have Jacob Cobb, who identifies himself as a trans-denominational Jew and a member of the Sufi community. And we also have Sri Aisopananasa Devidasi from the Cleveland Hare Krishnas. Okay. All right, so Judy, please.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I want to assure you that I'm not an important person. I'm not a politician, God forbid, and I'm not clergy in the usual sense, but I got really drawn into what we call multi-faith work in Toledo about 11 or 12 years ago, thanks to the vision of my dear husband, who just thinks we all ought to be friends and we all ought to get along. And so we've been intensely involved in the Toledo community, drawing together a very diverse populace of at least a dozen different faith traditions. And we're mostly lay-led. We have relationships with clergy, but we're mostly just ordinary folks that believe in the vision that Woody started, that we all ought to be friends. So we've done banquets, and we built 6 habitat houses with 12 different faiths, picking up hammer, working together. We're now working with community gardens on faith space, and that's been, we call that Multi-Faith Grows, and it's been wonderful. About 4 years ago, as one of the communications chairs for North American Interfaith Network, which I'm also serving on, which is international in that it includes Canada as well as the US, I became acquainted with Karen Armstrong and watched her TED Talk. And the TED group is a group of very strange bedfellows, technology, entertainment, and design. And the original talks have now been kind of hybridized locally, but the original talks, speakers are invited who have a great idea, and they're awarded a prize of $100,000 and the right to make a 20-minute speech and to make a wish for the world. And Karen Armstrong, who is a scholar of world religions, won this prize, and she gave a very eloquent talk. She called upon her audience to help bring about what she felt was the core of all religions. Having written 20 books about world religions, she realized that the core of all religions was compassion and the Golden Rule. And so she called upon the world's religious scholars to send in submissions of wordage for what she called a Charter for Compassion. And religious leaders, secular leaders from all over the world. I think they sent in something like 700,000 submissions. And a Council of Wisdom distilled this into a wonderful one-page document, which expresses, yes, a spiritual religious quality goal, but maybe more importantly, I think it's a human concept. It's a human value. It's a community value. And I sat at my computer waiting for the moment I was able to disseminate this wonderful charter to my readership from the North American Interfaith Network, because we got an advance copy, but we couldn't release it until the minute that everybody got it. And I had the privilege of being the 69th person to sign. And it really caught my imagination and my attention. Well, Seattle, Washington acted upon this charter by deciding to declare itself a compassionate city. And it led the way to what has now become a worldwide movement. They decided that their main goal would be to invite other cities to also sign on as compassionate cities. And about 4 years ago, I decided that this was something that Toledo and Northwest Ohio could do. We are a compassionate community. It's often the undertold story. You know, what makes the headlines of the media is always, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. And so we get headlines about the murders, and we get headlines about the blight, and we get headlines about the gangs. But there's wonderful things going on in our community that are far more positive. So one of our goals was to lift up those stories. And somebody asked me about a year ago, we finally declared in April. It took 4 years of work. And somebody asked me shortly before we actually declared, if you'd known it was going to take this much work, would you have done it? And I had to think a minute before I answered. But the answer is yes, I would have, because the blessings have been many. Hearing these wonderful stories of compassion in our own community have been a great blessing for me. One of the things we did along the way was to create a gallery of heroes of compassion. I'm a former teacher, and I'm so aware that the heroes that we have in pop culture are so bad for our young people. You know, doping jocks and entertainers who make the headlines for all kinds of bad reasons. These ought to be the heroes of our young people. And so I was really happy to start this Heroes of Compassion, and I have met some wonderful people. From a 4-year-old girl who was serving in a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving, and I'm already grabbed. Any family that serves in a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving instead of just pigging out at home is a good family. And this 4-year-old girl said, "Mommy, won't his feet get cold?" Because she saw a homeless man who had no socks. And Mom was trying to diffuse the distress of this little 4-year-old, not wanting her to be traumatized, said, "Oh, well, his shoes will keep him warm." But the next thing Mom knew, the little girl was down on the floor taking her shoes off. "Mommy, he can have mine." Mm-hmm. So the next day, the family went out and bought a lot of socks. And that was the birth of Hannah's Socks, which now distributes over 200,000 pairs of socks to the needy per year. If a 4-year-old can do it, can't we all? And that's just one of the stories that I really like. The rabbi mentioned times of tension, and I agree that we will always have times of tension. One of the things that Karen Armstrong writes about in her books, and in particularly in 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, is that out of these times of confusion and chaos that happen repetitively in history, rise the great prophets. and the peacemakers. And so it's as though the universe were sort of rocking in a cradle the birth of some of our great spokespeople for a saner and more compassionate world. And she says, it's hard to imagine a time when the compassionate voice of religion has been so sorely needed. Our world is dangerously polarized. There is a worrying imbalance of power and wealth, and as a result, a growing rage, malaise, alienation, and humiliation that have erupted in terrorist atrocities that endanger us all. She continues, we have a choice. Emphasize aspects of religious and secular traditions that speak of hatred, exclusion, suspicion, or work with those that stress interdependence and equality for all. And that's the choice that faces us. Wouldn't it be wonderful if this period in our history of chaos and violence were birthing the next prophets, the next sages, the next peacemakers? And I'd like to vote on that side. Why compassion? Compassion means, literally from the Latin derivation, it means feeling with the other. It's like empathy, but it's a little deeper because it moves one so deeply that they're compelled to act, to relieve the suffering of others. So at its best, compassion serves as a catalyst for change, for a more positive world. So how do you become a compassionate city? And I certainly hope that Cleveland will take that seriously. There's not a set roadmap. It's far more democratic than that. And so there are very few rules. And I think most people are a little uncomfortable with that. They kind of like to have a roadmap. I do this, and I do A, and I B, and a C, and I'm there. It's not quite that easy. It's certainly a very local initiative. There are about three things you need. You need a local team. One person could not do it. I've worked hard at this. I spend hours and hours and hours grinding out the stuff that has made this possible, but I couldn't have done it alone. I have a wonderful team of we call them compassion ambassadors. And if it hadn't been for those folks, we never would have made it. We managed at our designation to pull together 90 organizations doing compassionate work and have them in one room in the convention center to do a networking. And it was wonderful. Looking out over those 90 representatives, I thought, wow, this is the soul of Toledo and Northwest Ohio. These are the folks that are making it happen. And what we were trying to do was to help each of those 90 organizations to stop working in isolation and reach hands, because we could do so much more together. So anyways, you need a team. That's number one. Then you need, as a team, to really do a serious assessment of your community, because it has to fit your community. And so you have to look at, first of all of the compassion that is already here. And you have to seriously assess where your issues are, the things that aren't going so well. This movement is not to gloss over the issues and the problems. It's to throw a little compassion at the issues and problems and help to find compassionate solutions. So the assessment needs to look at both the positive and the negatives so that you can come up with at least one or two long-range goals that you are willing as a community to commit to. For us, it was one, rebranding Toledo and Northwest Ohio as the compassionate community it is, sort of telling the positive stories of compassion. And two, to network to find collaborative solutions so that we would not be working in isolation. Those were our two goals that we've committed to 10 years of. I may not live that long, but somebody will carry it on, I'm sure. So first a team, and then an assessment so that you can come up with goals, And then you have to involve the city government. And this was the hardest thing, because for us, every city's different. Huntington Beach did it in 2 weeks. I think that must be a record. Louisville, their mayor is so on this that I quote him all the time. He's always talking about compassion. And when he was running for office, his advisors said, don't talk about love and compassion. That doesn't have anything to do with politics. But he didn't listen to them. And his city has now been, by the Council of Mayors, been declared the most compassionate city. So even politicians can get it. Our mayor and city council and the Lucas County commissioners, because we decided we wanted to be a region, not just a city, made beautiful resolutions that call to using compassion as a strategy to help the citizens to have a better life, particularly those citizens who are most vulnerable. And the wording, I couldn't have written it better in any way. It's a perfect commitment on behalf of our government. So those are the three things. First of all, you have to have a good team. Then you have to come up with some goals that you're willing to actually commit to. And then you have to involve government, because you do have to have a ceremony where you sign, the city fathers and mothers sign the Charter for Compassion. Or in the case of a couple of cities that weren't happy doing that, they have to sign a resolution that sort of says that they're on the compassion page and movement. We have now a little bit over 40 actually designated cities, and they're global. It's not just the US, it's not just Canada, they're all over the world. And some of the places are in real hotbeds of contention. So they're really courageous to take this on. In addition to the cities that have actually completed the process to start their long-range goals, there are 225 active campaigns around the world. And that makes it a movement. And I'm really happy for Toledo and Northwest Ohio to be on this page. We weren't the first in Ohio. Cincinnati beat us. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we became a compassionate state? The state of California is trying to do that, but they got a much bigger state. So we in a way, we have a better chance. You know, if Cleveland comes on board and we get Columbus, and we've already got Cincinnati, we've already got Toledo, you know, we'd be pretty much on the way, I think, to becoming the first compassionate state. But we certainly welcome you to the movement. I had to commit when we were welcomed into the fold by Tom Williams, who was the me in Louisville. He said, you know, I'm happy to welcome you all, but you have to pass it forward. You have to pay it forward. And so that's why I'm here. I couldn't say no to Peter. I tried, but I couldn't say no to Peter because I'm committed to helping you as you do this movement. Just a quick little thing, and then I'll let the rest of you speak or ask questions. We're now involved in what's called the Compassion Games. 3 years ago, Louisville, which was the 7th compassionate city, challenged all the other cities at that time to prove they were the most compassionate. And they brought out a volunteer force of something like 90,000 people, and now it's up to 120 or 130,000 people that are doing service. So it's a kind of lighthearted way to co-opetite, because it's cooperative competition. Dr. Martin Luther King said that he wanted us to keep that competitive edge that we, especially as Americans, have. You know, we always want to be number one. He said, keep that, that's fine, but I want you to be first in love. And the Compassion Games want us to be first in compassion. So Toledo has now, I think it's 39 registered Compassion Games in our community, which are essentially service projects that are going on during the dates of between September 11th and September 21st. And we all know what September 11th marks. It actually has been declared a day of service. And September 21st is the United Nations Peace Day. So it's a nice culmination. So this is the first year we've played the games, but already it's fun because some people are coming out that didn't know about us and weren't interested until it was kind of a game and they could compete with it or cooperative with it. So the compassion games are kind of a fun thing. And I understand that some of you locally are considering playing the games in February during the first week of February, which is Interfaith Week, World Harmony Interfaith Week. So I think I've probably said as much as I can, unless you have questions that I can respond to. And so I'll turn the mic over to whoever is next.
All right.
Shall we do questions afterwards? Give
Yeah.
us a chance to speak.
Yeah.
So Sri Devidasi, would you like to, you ready to go next?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Greetings. My name is Sri Supanishad, and I represent the Hare Krishna community in the city of Cleveland. I am really grateful to be here today to share how we Hare Krishnas live the Golden Rule. Hare Krishnas see ourselves as servants. We are servants who engage in 6 loving exchanges. 1 is to give food prepared and offered with love. 2, to accept food offered and prepared with love. 3, to reveal one's heart and mind sincerely. 4, to hear with respect and confidence. 5, to give gifts with love and to accept gifts as well. We see all life as sacred and connected. Therefore, if I injure my brother, I injure myself. If I care for another living being, I care for myself. As Hare Krishnas, we are to extend this serving mood to all life, animals, plants included. What helps us stay in this mood of service, to keep this attitude of service constantly, we call upon the names of God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We also sing it, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Actually, when you sing the Maha Mantra, it makes you very happy. It engages you into thinking all types of loving thoughts of compassion and giving, and it just really clears the mind and makes you happy. Okay. When we chant this Maha Mantra, it helps purify our hearts, and it helps us to serve with humility as well. And this connection, I would like to share a story. I'd share the story about a king by the name of Rantideva. And the name of the story is A Meal Not Taken. King Ranti was a very good servant of his people. He was known as Rantideva. A deva is a godly or angelic being who often bestows good fortune on others. Ranti always sought the welfare of his citizens. At times when there was a shortage of food, he ordered that the food in the royal warehouse be given away in charity. And he and his family would fast. Once during very hard times, the king fasted for 48 days. He did not eat or drink. King Ranti became so weak and frail that he could hardly stand up. On the 48th day of the Ranti's fast, the cooks ordered to prepare a plentiful meal. A huge silver tray piled high with the finest foods was brought before the king. All of the ministers and advisors implored him to eat. When the king agreed, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Just at that time, a monk came to the palace. Out of respect, and as is the custom, Ranti first offered the meal to his guest. The monk ate only a small amount of food and was satisfied. He blessed the king and went on his way. King Ranti was about to eat when a working man came to the palace gate. "I have not found any work today," he said. "I have a family to feed." "Then take from my plate whatever you need," said the king. The man left with a good portion of the meal. Ranti had started out with a large plate, but now half of it was gone. Still, the king didn't need very much. There was enough food left to satisfy him. He was about to eat when a man and his dogs came to the palace. "O king, my dogs came to the palace. Please give us something to eat." The king handed over the entire plate, and the man and his dogs eagerly consumed what was left. All the food was gone. Ranti still had not eaten for 48 days. Now only a cup of fresh water remained on his table. King Ranti was just about to drink it when he heard a voice calling, "Water, water." Ranti looked up. He recognized the visitor to be a very miserly and spiteful man. "O king, give me some water," the man pleaded. His voice was parched, and he had never performed a kind act in his life. He had never given in charity. He had never given anything to anybody. But King Ranti graciously handed him the cup of water. Suddenly, everybody that he had fed that day, even the dogs, returned to the palace gate. When Ranti looked up, his fatigue, right before his eyes, all of them, even the dogs, shed their gross forms. They were not ordinary beings, but the devas themselves. They offered him many gifts and riches beyond description. They even offered him entrance into heaven itself. But Ranti waved away all their gifts, for he was not attracted to the comforts of this world nor the next. "I do not want anything," he said. "Let me just serve others, that their suffering may come to an end. Let this be my service to the Lord within the heart." He simply folded his hands in respect to the celestials. At that moment, Ranti felt a deep satisfaction in his heart. He saw no difference between a king or a beggar, or those who are beautiful or ugly. He saw all beings in their actual, splendorous, amazing forms, shining like 1,000 suns. And so it is said that if you feed a beggar, rejoice, for you actually may be feeding an angel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Cobb?
Remove the edges so it becomes a bigger smile. Just, it's a very subtle thing, but maybe we can move up just a bit and just move the side chairs over just a few.
We don't have enough time, Jacob.
You don't have to?
No.
Could I ask you to take that chair over there, put it down here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, appreciate being invited. Thank you. It's a funny thing. My father, if he was alive, would be 100 years old today. So I wanted to give him honor. He's a great person, but just thought I'd say that. Also, I know Rabbi Nosenchuk, who gave that talk, because he's the rabbi of the congregation that my family's been associated for almost close to 100 years. And he's quite a guy, you know. Anyway, I want to say something about interfaith And then I want to go to a subject which is the golden rule. Real simple, not too long.
Quick.
A lot of people are afraid of getting outside of their boundaries. And we're living in a transition period. I don't know maybe people are agnostics, everything's fine. Baha'is, Christians, Muslims. I happen to be listed myself as a trans-denominational Jew, which is my own invention, because I feel comfortable, and I've been in all parts of Judaism. I was Orthodox for 3 years. I was raised 13 years in that congregation. And I've been a monk for a year, and I do a lot of things. I like to be involved. But I'm still a practicing Jew, which I don't think we have to fear losing our own religion. You're the definer of your boundaries. Who cares? I'm also a Sufi for 40 years. And if you know anything about that, that might seem a little odd. But that's, what I chose to do or what I've been doing. I will say that also, in that synagogue, I was taught in 9th grade for the whole year interfaith studies in a synagogue. And that my mother and that got me very interested. They didn't lose me. My rabbi just died a few months ago. His name is Reb Zalman Sheker Shalomi. The Dalai Lama asked him for advice on how to have how do you support a community that is not in your own land. It's a very big influence on my life. And he would not give smicha. Now, smicha is an ordaining of the rabbis. He would not give ordination unless the person was practiced and able to chaplain 2 or 3 religions. Certainly you better know Judaism. Which I thought, that's a great idea. He says, it's a different time. It's a transitional period. So I encourage everybody, you're here. Obviously, you're open to some extent. Continue what you're doing and see how you can open yourself up to new paradigms. There's people here from it's great what's happening here. Now, I'm going to get to the subject here, which is the golden rule. And it's really simple. How much can you say about the golden rule? Common sense. Treat everybody, treat people like you'd want to be treated yourself. Judaism has a certain unique role there because the quote that's used most often, and every tradition, if you look it up, this is a common shared principle in humanity, but we're not doing it, obviously, because we're in chaos. But it's Hillel, who was from around the time of Jesus, said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow man or persons." That is the entire law. All the rest is commentary. Now, some smart guy said, "Can you explain Judaism in while I'm standing on one foot?" Well, obviously, so he came up with this comment, and it has lasted. This was the authority, and he's one of the founders of the major principles of Judaism 2,000 years ago, and it's still lasting. And a lot of he was stating a principle that had been firmed in traditional Judaism since 1800 BC. And certainly, if you look it up in the internet, every tradition back to Egypt and Babylon, Code of Hammurabi, they all had the golden rule. It's not. The problem is, are you applying it? Are you doing it? And right now, we can honestly say maybe not. I think a lot of us try. I'm trying to open up to the new paradigm. Means redefining. Now, there were some people from the congregation, believe it or not, I don't happen to be a gay man, but I go to a gay, what they call a chevra. It's a small worship group at Fairmount Temple that's under the umbrella of them. They've just been very welcoming. They said, "We thought you were gay." I said, "Well, not everybody's perfect. What can I say?" But they're very nice. I mean, maybe I'm not in agreement with everything, but I've learned a lot. I've learned a real lot there, and I continue to learn because, at a certain age, you want to keep learning. That's the whole fun. So I'm still learning, and obviously I'll be here later if you want to talk about anything, have some questions. But there's so many ways that you could restate this principle. If you really study the golden rule, every single group has slightly a different nuance, but it's essentially the same thing. It's just such common sense. Sometimes I thought, what about the guy who gave his wife, a Maserati and the woman doesn't even drive? Obviously it was for him. I mean, that's not really, that's sort of a crazy thing, but that has happened. There are controversies in the golden rule, if you can believe it. George Bernard Shaw wanted it to be more positive. The Jewish tradition relies on oral tradition and commentary for thousands of years. And they have some great rabbis. They have Rabbi Akiba. There was Maimonides around 1200. And a lot of this stuff, if you have it, I mean, it is sort of theological, and I'm more into the practical application. But a way Judaism has, because they've been very confined in their history, if you really knew Jewish history, they've been really creamed many years. They went over study of the law. So there's inferences from the law. You would study one piece of the commentary, and from that you could infer certain things, like how do you console mourners? What do you do if you find a lost wallet? What do you do with it? And somehow there's principles that really, it's not like a book. It's like an ongoing engagement where you use your hands, and I've been in it. It's really interesting. I'm not a Torah scholar. I'm not really a Talmudic guy either, but I enjoy the process. I have a partner here that I study with almost every week, Peter, and we learn a lot. Sometimes we go way off the topic, but I think it's always in the topic. Now, I don't know how much. I promise just to keep it very short. I want to see if there's one or two more points, and I'm going to end. I didn't say much about Sufism because I came here to talk about Judaism, but I will say that my teacher, Hazrat Anaya Khan, basically said, go into attunement, just try to see from another person's point of view, and that's not as easy as you can think. What if you have no cultural commonalities, but it's our challenge? This whole thing is a challenge. All of this is very challenging. This is great. There's no other place like this in the world. Cleveland's an amazing place, but we got some ways to go. I have lots more. I'll write an article on it. Thank you for the chance to talk with you. I could take time now or later for questions.
Later.
Would you prefer later?
Yeah, later.
Let's do that.
One more.
Thank you.
One more.
Jesus is all about compassion, and I love him for it. There do I find life itself. Compassion is shared suffering, which raises the ancient question, why do any have to suffer at all? Suffering points to needs that we have, which we need help to fulfill. Suffering then can be, should be, the threshold to love. Suffering calls to love, drawing it out as roots draw water from the soil. Hunger for food, pain for healing, confusion for understanding. The suffering cradles the need, and in compassion, Jesus shared in the suffering and worked to fulfill the need. Quote, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. As recounted earlier in the same gospel, Jesus taught, quote, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. We seek what is good for ourselves simply because we are selves. This commandment, though, requires us to acknowledge the essential and complete unity that we all share, that our meaning as persons is fully interdependent on our meaning as all people, and in truth, all of creation. We often respond to this broader awareness and its implications with fear. Oh, my people, does God know it? Does he share this pain with us? This pain, this fear, points to a need. The most critical need, which God has longed to fulfill, for he loves us. It is for that express purpose that God sent his Son into the world, as that oft-repeated passage from that other John proclaims. So many times does Jesus encourage us not to be afraid. Ultimately, Jesus became the way out of that fear, facing humiliation, rejection, torment, and death, the wrath of an empire, only to pass through it all, to illuminate the truth of meaning that surpasses death. Here is the ultimate power of compassion. Do not be afraid.
Well, thank you for all the speakers. I think I'll just sort of leave it kind of open-ended here. If anyone would like to address any questions to the speakers, please feel free.
Do we have time for Q&A?
Yeah, you have until 4. So
Oh, wow, okay.
yeah.
Sure.
Well, if there are no questions, we have a banner here for the Charter for Compassion. This is our first public event in this area, and we have a banner that we would welcome anyone to sign who is in agreement with our goals that we would use in future events as a demonstration of the good works and intentions of the community at large. So I'm going to spread it out up here, and if anyone would like to come up and sign it, that would be great. I do. I have.
We also, you want to mention the reception? Upstairs?
Thank you. Yes, and following this, at our tent, which is up on East Boulevard, just south of the Greek Garden, anyone who'd like to join us for a brainstorming session after this about moving forward, we would love that as well. So go up the Italian Garden, turn right, and then it's, I don't know, maybe 100 yards at most.
Thank you so much, Conrad, and all the other speakers. Our next speaker will begin around 4, and it is Elena Coe. She is Miss Ohio International.